Nice to have you here. You got two Raymonds in the room. Confused you, didn't you? Okay.
You don't go Ray and Raymond. That's what
Ray and Raymond. All right, good. Grab a seat. And if you want to go grab a beer, you can go do that.
grab this seat.
That one's just as good as any. Okay. I'm ready when you guys are ready. It, and on Thursday evenings here, we're telling that story to the guests here in the room. I think Francis, as you've been a regular, thank you for coming almost every evening, and really been, I think, an important series to know what the big trends are in the world and some of the solutions that are available to us. These have been hard things. This is not easy stuff for these students, whether it be the fishery depletion, ozone. I'm sorry, the deforestation. I think last week we looked at soil restoring the soils. This is a tough one. I've been involved in the hunger issue my whole life, at least for the last 30 years. Signed a hunger project card that said let's end hunger by the year 2000. We didn't make it, obviously, and now we're trying to figure out how to feed 8 billion people well in this next coming decade. So that's the topic for this evening. I want to thank our partners. We have the Equinox Center, United Nations Association of San Diego, and the World Affairs Council for joining us and participating. Our sponsor for this whole series, primary sponsor, has been the Global Energy Network Institute. Another great idea of Bucky's that has to do with linking renewable energy resources around the world. Called that the #1 strategy for the planet, so not an insignificant statement at all. The SimCenter, the World Resource SimCenter, our mission is to visualize sustainable solutions to global and local problems so that we make more informed choices quicker. So what we're about here is visualizing sustainability. That's our mission, so that we collectively as citizens, as policymakers, as business people, get to more sustainable decisions and actions and investments quicker. So with that, that's our introduction. We have the S team tonight. When I say that, all their last names are S. We have Leonardo Cirtoli from Brazil, Emma Sullivan, she's a student at UCSD, and Pavel Svoboda with Claremont High. They're going to take different sections of this evening and dig into this deeply. And with that, I think, Leonardo, you're beginning?
Yeah.
All right. This is Leonardo.
So,
Introduce yourself.
so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again to come. My name is Leonardo. I came from Brazil. I came to San Diego 4 months ago to study in English, and I figured out about Genie. And I've been working with Plan B and here since June. So our presentation tonight is about how to feed 8 billion people well. The first question that comes to mind is why 8 billion people instead 7.2 billion people, that is the current population in the world. If you look at the screen number 2, you're going to see that we have the population growth projection. So we have 3 fertility assumptions. If you maintain the fertility rate for nowadays, by 2050, you're gonna reach 10.6 billion people, and you're gonna reach 15.8 billion people up to 2100. There is other projection, which is the United Nations projection. In this projection, we are going to reach 9.3 billion people at 2050 and 10.1 billion people 50 years later. And also there is the third with a low fertility rate assumption that's going to reach 8.1 billion people in 2050 and 6.2 billion people in 2100, which means that the population will start to decrease after 2050. Lester Brown, in his book, predicted that this is a prediction that approach more to the Lester Brown prediction. But Lester Brown prediction, it's about predict this decrease in the population because of lack of food. So instead a low fertility assumption, Lester Brown assumed that the population will start to decrease due to the increase of mortality. So that's why we're working with 8 billion people. The next question that's come to mind is, do we have enough food to feed our entire population? According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, we produce now 3,500 calories a day, per capita, I mean. So we not only produce food enough to feed all the entire population on Earth, but also we have food enough to make all the population fat. If you're looking at this map showing the day calorie intake per capita. So if you look at the dark blue color, you're gonna see that in countries like United States, Canada, and some countries of Europe, such as France and Italy, the consumption, the calorie intake per capita reaches 3,700 calories per day, per capita. While in some countries of Africa, such as Congo and Zambia, we have less than 2,000 calories intake per capita a day. So we have food enough. We had enough food, I mean. But the problem is the distribution of food. So what should we do? Should we send the food to the countries that don't have food? No. We need to improve the productivity of food in those countries. To do that, we need to use land more efficiently. Two techniques for that, one technique that it can improve is you need to improve the cropping around the world. One technique that you can use for multiple cropping is relay cropping. In relay cropping, we grow legumes and cereals at the same time, alternating one another. Another technique of multiple cropping is double cropping, which we grow separately cereals and legumes. The main difference of those is in the relay cropping you can produce both at the same time during the same season. In double cropping, normally we produce, for example, some cereal during the winter and some legume during the summer, for example. But what are the advantages of the multiple cropping? Here is example of the amount of lean, a kind of waste that it's found on cotton. If you use conventional method of crop, the amount of lean found inside the production of cotton per acre is, if you use double crop, the lean found is 7% smaller than if you use conventional method. So this is one of the advantages. This is an example to show that the double crop is better than conventional crop. Another advantage that you have is the reduction of risk to lose production by droughts, by pests, and by disease. Since we have more than one type of crop, if you lose a production of one kind of crop, for example, because of a pest, you can have another type of crop. And we also maintain the fertility of the soil fertility by fixing nitrogen in the soil. How does it work? If you look again at the screen number 4, the leaves left from the legumes to the soil here you go again. If you look at the screen number 4, the soil fertility, if you look at the screen number 4, the leaves that the legumes left on the ground make the soil in this kind of crop more fertile than in a single cropping. Also, if you have different types of crops, a family that has a different type of crop, a multiple cropping, can have a balanced diet to their family. And another important fact is that you can grow different seasonal crops during the same year. So that's the advantage of multiple crop. That's another. Another test. Try again. Test. Yeah, I can. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? No. No.
Talk loudly.
How about here? How about now? Can you hear me?
That's better.
It's better. I don't know what happened.
Have you talk loudly?
Yeah.
Okay?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I need to. I'm gonna be here just for 2 slides and then. You got it? Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. So here we go. Another solution that if we found is increase the use of fertilizer. Since the 60s, you can see in the graph, for million of metric tons used of fertilizer, since 60s, you can see that the use of fertilizers are increasing. The thing is, the use of the fertilizer usage for Europe and for North America, here in orange, and here Europe in the light blue. So you can see that's a kind of stabilized use of fertilizer. So according to the American government, since the 80s, 1980s, the utilization of fertilizer in America is the same. So another solution that I have to improve our productivity is increase the use of fertilizer. Another thing that you need to improve is how to use water. Believe it or not, 70% of the production of water nowadays is directed to irrigation. And just 20% is directed to industry and 10% is directed to domestic use. So, and also we have the information that you need to produce 1 ton of grain, you need 1,000 tons of water. This means that you need to improve our irrigation systems to improve the way that we use water nowadays. So here we go with some types of irrigation systems that we have today. The first type is called flood, that consists in flood filled with water to provide water for the crops. That's the least efficient technique that we have. Another technique that we have is called furrow, that consists in a channel flooded of water with pipes connected to provide water to the crops. The third system is called sprinkler. This system consists in spraying water through the air to reach the areas that we need to the areas that needs water. Excuse me. The last systems is called drip irrigation systems. That's the most efficient technique that we have today. In this system, the distribution of water you use pipes to provide the exactly amount of water that the plants need. So if you look at the efficiency of these 4 systems, you see that the flood systems, for example, has only 65% of efficiency, while the drip system has 90% of the efficiency. Also,
I think we're all right.
okay. Beyond it. Yeah, that's the problem. test. Oh, here you go, I know it is. Test. And also using, so the drip system is the best irrigation system and the system that you suggest to use in the crops. The drip system also has one more advantage. Using the drip irrigation, you can have also with the same better productivity. This is an example from the government of Australia to the sugar yields in tons per hectare. So since 2009, from 2002, we have in the blue color using furrow systems, irrigation systems. And we have this production, 25 approximately. And using the drip system, you have more than 30. And all these examples, those years, we have a productivity, a better productivity in using drip irrigation instead of furrow irrigation. I'd like to come to another thing of water usage. Is how much calories can you produce using the same amount of water? If you look at this graph, in the dark blue, you see the production of calories of rice using 1 cubic meter of rice. So you can produce 2,000 calories of rice using per cubic meter of water. We also can produce 2,300 calories of wheat with the same amount of water. In red, you see that you can produce almost 4,000 calories of maize with 1 cubic meter of water. But you can produce 5,060 and 600 calories of potato with the same amount of water. So, which means that if you consider a diet of 2,000 calories a day, you can feed one person with rice using 1 cubic meter of water. But you can feed almost 3 people if you grow potato instead. That's the finish of the first section. If you have some questions, clarify, please.
Time for questions, discussion on this first set. Yes?
What is fertilizer?
What is fertilizer?
Fertilizer is some products that you put on the farm to grow better your production, to grow the crops better. It's some products that you can use to improve the quality of your products and improve your production.
Is it organic or is it manufactured?
What's it normally? What do we know fertilizer to be normally to be?
Petrochemical byproducts.
Mostly petrochemicals, right? But is there a primary fertilizer element
Yes.
that we add?
Isn't
Nitrogen.
Which is nitrogen, basically.
It's nitrogen. Yeah. So nitrogen leaches out, I think, when we overwater, and so we have to replace that. So the idea is that if you look at a lot of the fertilizer you buy in the store and look at that chemical content, I think the majority of it normally is nitrogen. Ray.
Yeah, question. I had a friend, he was one of 20 sons in Nebraska. They basically had many sons to be the farm workers. It was a very interesting situation. He was the last and he inherited the farm. And he chose engineering because when he found out as he went to change from petrochemical, because he felt he was poisoning people, to another one, and he wasn't basically allowed to. The regulations forced him to use the petrochemicals that were for sale. He got discouraged and became an engineer to solve the problem because of those types of regulations. There's been such other proposals like good bugs, where you can put on food and renewable fertilizers. So what work have you found in those areas, so like a renewable fertilizer, so it's like a closed loop type thing?
Did you study it or not?
Not at all, I think.
Okay.
Not enough to answer your question, I think.
That wasn't part of the discussion that they got into. We did have a presentation just a couple of days ago. I'm going to say more about the slow food, the local food movement that is really about reducing petrochemicals in the farm and using much more, I'm going to say, what do you call it, disease, I would say pests that are positive that are killing the other bad bugs. So it's like there are some good bugs to kill the bad bugs. And people that avoid using chemicals in their fertilizer, or chemicals as opposed to being much more organic. And so there is, and I can't remember the actual statistic, there was tilling that we now are doing for 35% of the new farms are using a tilling technique. I don't think we heard how many are using non-agribusiness fertilizer, but it's a great question. So we need to find that out as well. So I don't think we know that answer yet.
I know one of the answers maybe, I know our local landfill is now composting food scraps and shrubbery. And they have big mounds of soil that they now give away. So it's one of the closed loop measures going on, but I don't know if farmers are doing that in the Midwest or not. Another source of trace minerals for soil is kelp or seaweed mixed with those compost piles. I know there's some solutions, but I have not heard of anything formal, going on for a renewable fertilizer resources. Interesting.
Where can you get that at?
Over at the Miramar landfill, it's actually very cool. You can take green waste to the Miramar landfill for free. You know, the stuff that if you cut down trees and your grass, and they'll actually, you don't have to pay to dump that, and you dump it in a different place, and then they grind it up, and it ends up cooking. I don't know what the temperature is, but it cooks for a while, and they probably add good bugs to it. And when it's all prepared, you can go with your truck or your trash can and just get free mulch, free compost.
Yeah.
It is the best deal in town. So that's a great. It's just off of Highway 52, is it?
52, yeah. The
52 at the Miramar landfill. Yeah.
I think Paul Michael has the answer.
Yeah.
Along with additional fertilizer in the Midwest, zero tillage and other techniques both preserve and maintain the ability of soil to create great crops. So they're all used in combination. So it's not just a one style or one thing fixes everything. It's everything in combination.
Yeah.
So fertilizer plus appropriate tilling techniques plus effective use of choosing the right crop and
Crop
multiple
rotation.
cropping, everything used together really maintains the soil production.
And wasn't this really part of this fertilizer consumption, part of the green revolution of our time? That was it Norman Borlaug, I think, was
You're
the
gonna
one.
You're gonna talk later. about
Okay,
green
sorry.
revolution.
Don't want to jump ahead.
Yes, I think so. We're gonna
Alright.
keep with. Can you switch?
Any more questions? Yes, please.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is there a goal to gradually have these fertilizing systems of collecting like they're doing here in San Diego? I live out in Encinitas, and I was told we don't have composting. Composting is the best fertilizer.
Yes. Yes. So is there? What the question is?
The
Is there
question
a?
is,
If the goal to have more food for the planet isn't to arrange that every community has its own composting
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, the main part of our presentation it's gonna be in the next 6 slides. This is one of techniques to increase the production and increase agricultural things. but there is other fact that is change to increase or to food or to feed our population. You need to shift for food to fuel. But this is in the next 6 slides. I think it's a kind of more likely our solution. It's the next 6 slides. So I think that this first 12 slides is a kind of some techniques that you can fit, that you can make to change, to increase our productivity of food. But it can also shift for production of food to fuel cars, to produce food to feed people, and that's what I'm talking about in the next 6 slides. Okay.
I thought this was fascinating, how much you get out of a cubic meter of water. You know, grow potatoes instead of rice. You know, if you're.
There was one company I looked at 4 years ago called Soil Food Web.
Mm-hmm.
And this man learned in his garage how to make food for soil, and then he got a PhD to back it up. And what they do is every time you use a toxic to correct something, it kills off necessary microorganisms that you can't repair. So they have a soil stain technique to develop. They measure the missing good bugs in food. They put it in water, and they use a golf cart to spray it on the golf course or on a farm or on soil for that area. It reestablishes this microbalance, so what you get is the right growth of the plant. Called Soil Food Web. It might be worth looking up.
Soil Food Web?
Yeah, and they love to talk to students and train people in this technique. Whether you're in South America or Africa, they now have offices. They've grown so fast, they're worldwide, and they will send somebody to train that particular country. And their idea is to get you to do it so you're self-sufficient where you're at. Called Soil Food. It's a very, very fascinating approach.
Very nice. We ready to go?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so let's flip to the next dozen. So our trusty staff will walk around and shift to the next set of slides. We actually think that this is one of the best ways to have a conversation, so you see the whole dialogue at one time.
So what I was talking about before is the main reason that I think, if you please turn your attention to the slide number 2. In the screen number 2, we're asking, food or fuel? This slide is showing that with 8 bushels of corn, we can produce 21.6 gallons of ethanol. Or we can produce food to feed a person for the whole year. So just to make a comparison, if you take your car and go to Santa Barbara and come back, you are consuming enough grain, fuel enough food you're consuming the quantity of corn that can feed one person for the whole year. What is the best choice? It's go take a ride with your car and go to Santa Barbara, or feed one person.
Feed one person for a year.
Yeah. Yeah. But you don't. The thing is, you don't need to get out of your car. You have other things that you can do for that. So beyond this, we have also some losses in food in our system of food supply distribution. In our food distribution nowadays, we have some losses in storage, in packing, and in distribution of food. So, for example, we lose almost 10% of our seafood during the distribution. And also you lose 12% of the fruits and vegetables during the distribution of this food. So what is our system nowadays? Our system is you are growing grains to fuel cars, and to produce fuel, and this fuel is directed to some of this fuel is directed to trucks that transport this food for us to feed the people. Our proposal is produce this food and this food needs to go directed to people. How can we do this? That's our solution is localized agriculture, which is the concept of localized agriculture is make the demand and the supply of food as near as possible. And we have a video to show that for you.
What's to love about food co-ops? Where do I start? Co-ops have a cool way of doing things differently. Co-ops are people working together for better food, stronger communities, and a healthier world. And the food? Amazing. All it takes is one visit to a co-op to know this is where you find great tasting, nutritious food, along with earth-friendly household and personal care products. But did you know? Co-ops are owned by consumers like me, not investors. And I'm proud to be one of the 1.3 million members nationwide. Because at co-ops, I can find meat that is sustainably raised and a ton of delicious organic produce. Honeycrisp apples. Co-ops are super recyclers of plastics, cardboard, and food waste. Great for Mother Nature. The average co-op purchases from 51 local farms and 106 other local producers. I love my local farmers. How about a little comparison shopping? Compared to other grocers, co-ops work with more local farmers and producers, carry 3 times more locally sourced products, donate more than 3 times as much annual income to charity, and sell far more organics, whether it's produce or other products. Co-ops spend more on local wages and benefits than conventional grocers, which means they can pay employees nearly $1 more an hour. And more of their employees are eligible for health insurance. That's what I'm talking about. Co-ops spend 38% of their revenue locally, while conventional grocers only spend 24%. And for every $1,000 spent at a food co-op, more than $1,600 is generated in the local economy. That's 1.5 times more money in your local economy than if you spent the same amount at a conventional grocer. So why do I shop at the co-op? Because fresh, delicious food is just the beginning.
So that's what the explanation about localized agriculture that we have. But one example of localized agriculture that we have for now, that we have today, nowadays, in Singapore is a vertical farm that you talked about weeks before. A vertical farm, it's a concept that we can grow, instead grow the crops horizontally, we'll grow vertically. And we have a video to show that. This example is in Singapore.
Low-carbon commercial vertical farm.
The A-frame towers stretch 9 meters high. They have multi-layered troughs which rotate so that each row can access water as well as sunlight for the vegetables to grow. Engineer Jack Ng invented the technology because Singapore relies on imports for 90% of its food.
Food is very important. Country must have their own supply. If everything is depend to import, one day you will have a problem of shortage of food. So from there, I think that I have to do something for that. So you have to go vertically because we have land issue.
The farm has been constructed on 3.5 hectares of land. Each tower costs $15,000, and so far only 500 have been built. When this farm is fully operational, there'll be about 2,000 towers which can be harvested. Each one can provide up to 150 kilograms of vegetables each month. Singapore's government has backed the Sky Greens project, and it wants other farmers to consider adopting the technology.
It is important that we adopt out-of-the-box solutions such as the vertical farms of Sky Greens and any other technology that can increase our productivity per unit area of land to its maximum.
At this more traditional farm, Dave Huang's family has been working the land for 3 generations. He believes it could be years before the technology behind vertical farming is proven.
When you're doing vertical farming, you're actually challenging the nature, you know. Like, for example, you are sharing the sunlight and stuff like that. So basically, there's a lot of obstacles to overcome.
But that's not denting the optimism of Sky Green's inventor. He maintains the system is commercially viable and believes his vertical farms will soon start cropping up even outside of Singapore, because the towers are so versatile they can be built in urban areas anywhere. Ashley Neem, BBC News, Singapore.
So that's an example of vertical farm. We also have a project here in San Diego downtown to construct a building of 20 floors and we provide the web link here for you and Gotta Me Online. So you can check a projection to, I think, J Street. There is one project of vertical farm to San Diego downtown. The project is to construct an apartment building with half of the floor of apartment and half of farms. And that's the end of my section here. If you have any questions, please. Time for questions.
Okay, some more time for dialogue and questions about this. Ray?
There's a local man in San Diego called Hometown Farms.
Yep,
and he's made a vertical model, and if you heard of him, Encinitas Schools and Whole Foods are looking to buy from him. Have you done any research on that area?
He was presenting here last Tuesday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dan Gibbs
was here. Last Tuesday I was not here to the presentation, but yeah, Madeline, we can.
It was excellent. Yeah, Hometown Farms.
So what he's gotten funding from a number of people, a couple million. He's building his first facility right in, I'm going to say downtown, but right in a very dense area of Vista, on East Vista Way. I can't remember the size.
Next to Starbucks.
On East Vista Way. The guy's smart, got some smart business people behind him, and I think the most powerful statistic that came out of that when you get into that food cycle that we saw, 58 cents of the dollar went to distribution. All of the trucking and the people moving that food from farm to the store. So over half of the dollar that you pay went to move, just trucking and all of that gas and movement. He says we're basically going to grow it in the greenhouse and have the market right on the other side of the wall. So the distribution was 10 cents instead of 58, essentially. So he took half half of the price out of the vegetable that you're going to be buying, and he'll harvest it exactly when it needs to, so there's more nutrition in it rather than harvesting it early in its cycle. So it's fresher, more nutrition, just a whole raft of good benefits from this concept that I think we're going to see in San Diego within the year. So very cool, and that the company is called Hometown Farms. Is that it? Yeah. So it'll be. California, yeah. So pretty much, I don't want to say right downtown, but boy, it was surrounded by homes, and many people will just be able to walk there, buy it fresh. You don't have to have it in your backyard. He can grow it for you, but he'll sell it at certainly a lot less than the Albertsons that's going to be right next door.
What fertilizer is he using? That's one of the keys. Did he mention the fertilizer source?
He didn't. I don't think he mentioned fertilizer other than vertically. I'm going to say it's more, it wasn't hydroponic, it was organic. I'm going to say it was almost organic. Biodynamic. So they add minerals to the water so that make sure the vegetables have the minerals that they need, but it wasn't soil based. All right? It's more in that vertical realm. Yeah. And then they recycle all the water, right? So the water gets used again and again and again. Francis?
In that area, you know, where Henry's, it's an establishment, and right across the street there's the new one called Sprouts. And, you know, Henry used to be that kind of establishment that would produce all of these preservatives in the food. Well, what is the competition between the Sprouts that is newly established and Hometown Farms, which you're saying is more, you know, of a preservative than others, and then Henry's, which went out of business, but what is the new name of Henry's now? I think they got into
Sprouts.
It's Sprouts, I
well,
think.
no, Sprouts is across the street where our Henry's was, so it's called.
It was Boney's? Well, they were brothers.
Boney's.
Yeah, they kind
that
of.
was prior to Henry's.
Right.
And now it's a new one. But Sprouts is right across the street. So I'm saying, what is the variances in what they're offering in a lot of these fresh preservatives?
Well, I don't Henry, all the Whole Foods, they basically are buying more organically, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so you probably pay a little bit more, don't you?
I wouldn't
I
think.
shop at Whole Foods, pay a lot more.
Yeah,
So you
well,
pay
said-
more for organic.
Well, you see, I haven't shopped at these others, so I'm not sure. But now you're saying Henry's in their establishment, if they're more preservative, they will cost more than these farms.
No, less preservatives. Less
Well,
preservatives.
these have less preservatives, you're saying.
Which ones?
The Hometown Farms.
They don't exist yet.
Well,
So
no, but you explain what they will provide for us.
It's going to be as fresh because you're going
Right.
to harvest it
Right.
today and eat it that afternoon.
Okay, so
Right.
now these establishments like Sprouts and Henry, what is their, you know, premise of providing more?
I think their premise is that you're not getting any you're not getting any big agriculture fertilizer food. They're buying it from more local farms, more organic farms, and you're paying a little bit more.
Oh, okay. Well,
You're going to pay more for that.
Homegrown, we can say it's homegrown and not necessarily.
Locally grown,
Okay.
without pesticides.
Okay.
Right. So there's probably more tender loving care, but it costs a little bit more.
Thank you.
Okay, just one.
Other questions?
Yeah, just one thing. I saw you taking pictures. We have all the presentation online on the genie.org, and also we have the recorder of video in the ustream.tv/channel/WRSC.
Yeah.
So
you'll be able to get.
you'll
this
be able
online.
to get everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But
More
we're
questions?
Happy to have you take pictures as well.
Oh.
Yeah. Other questions, comments about this? We good? Next person?
Yeah, I'll set it up for you. Okay. And Now you got Pavel to continue with our presentation.
Hi, I'm Pavel, and I'm here with Plan B, and as Peter said, I'm a Claremont High student, and I'm very happy to be joining this program. So, in order to feed 8 billion people well, we need to look at what our current resources are. And in this part of our presentation, we're going to focus on where our protein is. So, can I have the pen? Thank you. So currently, 36% of our grain consumption goes towards livestock. And here we have the amount of kilograms of feed to increase the weight of an animal by 1 kilogram. Beef, it takes about 10 kilograms of feed to produce 1 kilogram of beef. Pork, about 4. Chicken, 2. And your fish, 1 to 2. And by knowing this, we can determine the efficiency level of how to make this efficient. And moving on, another thing that needs to be taken into consideration is the water required to produce this food. And continuing with animal products, beef takes anywhere from 15 to 70,000 liters to produce this kilogram of meat. Same with sheep, 6,000, goats 4, chickens about up to 5. We also have crops that show the liters to produce 1 kilogram in weight. Now the importance behind all this is that to determine the efficiency, we need to know how it affects our diet and what we need to conserve in order to make sure that we don't use all of our resources. Here we have the footprint of 1 UK person and of their diet, which takes about half a football field of an area. So the diet consists of 53% of red meat, 12% white meat. You have your grains, your dairy, oils, fruits, alcohol, eggs, and anything else. So by knowing what your diet composes of, we can figure out where our efficiency needs to go and how we conserve where we put our resources. And any questions?
Sure.
Yes.
Vegetable protein versus animal meat protein, is there any broad comparisons for resource use and land, sort of like land sustainability? I've heard data, but I've never heard anything conclusive.
What's vegetable protein?
Peanuts or
nuts, soybeans, right?
There's a new superfood called Salba. It's a chai seed. More protein in a steak, more calcium than milk, omega-3, 6, 9 oils, and it has magnesium and other minerals. A superfood, like a super. It's a little seed. I know that's supposed to be a good one, but I don't have anything conclusive. I was wondering. I know the vegetable has much less resource intensity than the animal meat. So that's the question.
Have you heard of that?
No, but
right.
Not about these products, but soybeans as food. In Brazil, we do have. I don't know about here in America, but in Brazil, it's a kind of common to have soybeans as food, like soybean meat made by soybeans and those kind of things. So, and you can produce easily soybeans. You don't need to produce soybeans or produce grain to make meat. You produce directly meat by soybeans. So that's a kind of change that also Lester Brown mentioned in his book.
So because his notion about food or fuel, soybeans and corn are primary fuel crops,
exactly.
At least in America, right? And instead of using them for fuel, wouldn't it be smarter to use them for food?
For food.
Right? And same concept here. If you're a meat eater, you're using a whole lot more grain and water. This is not a be vegetarian evening, but it's clear that if you want to preserve more grain, or if you want to be more resource efficient, both in water and grain, move toward a more vegetarian diet. That's clearly what I got. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And also that beef requires more grains and more water to be produced than pork and chicken and fish, for example.
Right.
Any other questions? Nope.
Other questions?
All right. We will now flip all the slides and continue with Emma.
Is it the down arrow? Is that what we do?
Left.
Left arrow or right arrow?
Hello, my name is Emma Sullivan. I'm a student at UCSD. I'm studying ecology, behavior, and evolution in the Department of Biology there. So now we're going to move on talking more about plants. Traditionally, when you want to achieve a specific trait in a plant, you would have, thank you. As you see over here, you would have the donor variety, which may have a specific desired gene, and then you have another variety of a plant, and if you want this gene in it, traditionally you would combine the two, and the result would be a mixture of the two, but it may not have the specific characteristic that you want. Recently, there has been genetic engineering, which gets into genetically modified organisms, where scientists will take a specific gene and insert it into the recipient variety to achieve a certain characteristic, such as drought resistance or some other desirable trait. So the next slide kind of explains a bit more about genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. It's a bit difficult to read, but you can see that a GMO is when there's the direct human manipulation of an organism's DNA in a laboratory environment. It's not the same as the traditional just plant breeding and cross-pollination of plants. And there's a variety of public opinions on GMOs. Some people, from a CBS News poll, 87% of people want their GMOs to be labeled. However, that is not one of the laws in this country, so we don't necessarily know whether the things that we're buying are genetically modified organisms or not. And 53% of people said that they would not buy things that they had been genetically modified. And so into the next two slides, we can see both the good and the bad sides of genetic modification. Some of the benefits include a reduction in insecticide use, higher yields, certain benefits for farmers, which originally stemmed from the fact that they could produce more when their organisms, when the plants that they are producing have certain traits that make them more resistant to drought or to insects or things like that. They can also provide defense against aggressive diseases, as was the case in Hawaii in the 1990s, when there was a papaya ring spot virus that nearly wiped out the entire crop. However, they were able to genetically modify a papaya that had resistance to this virus and thereby save the industry. However, there are also concerns about the drawbacks to genetic modification, which include certain concerns about health. An example would be if there was an allergenic protein used in a GMO, that could be problematic for people who are allergic to this specific protein, as well as concerns about IP ownership, whether people may increase costs for things if they have a patent over certain genetic modification techniques. So concerns about superbugs or superweeds that could develop, as well as particularly the lack of transparency, the fact that we don't know which foods are genetically modified and which are not. And if you're looking at where we find genetically modified organisms, the crop area by country, they're mainly in the United States. Over 50% are produced in the United States, followed by Argentina with 17%, Brazil with 13%, and 6% in India. That's on a large scale, more like corporations that are using this. But if you look at the small scale, 9 out of 10 farmers planting GMOs are resource poor and living in developing countries. An interesting benefit, though, that there was to genetic modification was a hybrid type of maize that was produced in Zimbabwe, and that reduced the amount of time it took before the maize was mature, so that it took only 136 days rather than between 150 and 180, which was great in this part of the world when they're facing severe droughts and things like that. Recently, there's been a trend toward looking up to see if we can produce meat in a lab, which is an interesting topic, but we have a video explaining how that would work.
Merchandise for free, 30 seconds.
It's an interesting topic, though, to see if we could actually produce our meat in a lab.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know.
Google's Sergey Brin has found a new industry to disrupt. I'm Tom Bemis for MarketWatch. It turns out the money behind that new test tube burger comes from the Google co-founder, better known for revolutionizing the online ad industry. Brin's interest in test tube meat technology appears to be threefold. For one thing, Brin says the technology of using stem cells to create meat is cool and interesting. Additionally, growing meat in test tubes instead of on farms could end a lot of animal suffering. But the key thing is, growing beef in test tubes will save us from having to become vegetarians.
There are basically three things that can happen going forward. One is we will all become vegetarian. I don't think that's really likely. The second is we ignore the issues, and that leads to continued environmental harm. And the third option is we do something new.
A lot of questions remain unanswered, including what to do with the world's unemployed cowboys, whether test tube beef can be kosher, and whether the University of Texas will have to change the name for its sports teams away from the Longhorns.
So that's a look at some of the effects of potentially growing our meat in petri dishes. Moving on over here, you can see the consumption of grain per person per year for food and feed. Can you hear me?
Here.
Okay. Is that better? Okay. In the United States, 800 kilograms of grain per person per year are go into our consumption. And the majority of that is consumed indirectly because much of our grain is going to feed livestock, whereas in India it's lower, only around 200 kilograms. But Lester Brown emphasized that the most healthy kind of diet is that in a Mediterranean diet like in Italy, which includes meat, cheese, and seafood, but all in moderation. And this type of diet is proved to be healthier. So if we can move towards having balanced diets, perhaps with a greater amount of vegetables and things like that, and we will be healthier overall, and that would be a great situation. Are there any questions or discussion about these topics?
Other than I think that GMO meat is test tube meat is gross.
Yeah.
I saw the ad on
Yeah.
You got Laura and Ray.
Do you want it labeled if you...
I never want to go there, you know?
Yeah, one of the things about meat, I met a man who was a 10-speed rider who studied food. And he said that meat, because animals eat all these different vitamins in the fields, and then it gets condensed why it has benefit for people. So this meat, because it's not done that way, it's kind of confusing. There's
Yeah.
nothing stored in the meat.
Yeah,
so
they
where's
grow
the
it.
food value when you make it out of stem cells?
That's a great question. I really don't know enough about it to know how nutritional these potential meat sources would be, but it's definitely kind of a almost disturbing kind of idea to be eating it from a stevia.
I'm not a vegan, but well, I guess I kind of sort of am, but I'm not completely a vegan. But I always wonder because I've seen, you know, like what is it, forks over knives and all those, you know, the plant-based diet. And I have this conversation with my friends who are meat eaters. There is protein there should be enough protein for human beings if we don't eat any meat at all. And legumes, I mean, isn't that correct? Can we live our lives without?
There are other sources of protein. I don't know that much about that particular topic, but yeah, soybeans.
Soybeans is one of them.
All nuts have protein in them.
I think soy produces estrogen though, better for women than it is men.
Lara?
That's a bad thing.
Lara?
Yeah, I didn't bring my glasses. What does it say under a GMO is not?
It says a GMO is not plants and animals that are traditionally bred to achieve specific characteristics, such as breeding dogs or cross-pollinating plants.
And what does it say under may help big world problems?
There's a quote. It says, agricultural biotechnologies provide opportunities to address the significant challenges of ensuring food security without destroying the environmental resource base.
Cool. And then what about problems?
Sorry, where? World problems? Yeah. Gene transfer from GMO crops could contaminate non-GMO crops and wildlife. Genetic modifications could create super invasive species. Opponents are concerned about these and other unknowns.
Are those hypotheses or have been proven?
I think that's what their concern is, that they don't think that there is enough research on these.
That's happened.
I think it's more.
Where they've seen, I would say, GMO seeds get into the non-GMO field, right? So whether it was bad labeling or maybe the seed just got picked up by a bird and moved over. I think they've tried to keep it isolated, but it's one of those things that once the cat's out of the bag.
But that's the same as hybrid.
Same as?
It's a crossbreed, so it's just part of the.
Well, hybrid is natural, right? Hybrid is a natural process of evolution, isn't it? Or hybridization can be where we marry up
like
grafting trees. That's hybridization, but that's not genetically modifying the DNA of the seed.
Yeah.
So that's different. So this GMO is done in a lab to modify it, and some people are very concerned about that.
Right, but then the concern is just come out from the fear of unknown. They don't know what exactly the fact is. It hasn't been proven that they are bad.
Could be true. We don't. It may be one of those things that we don't find out the consequence for maybe a few generations. So we don't see it right away, but we'll see it in generations. We'll see it in our kids. Who knows, right? It's one of those unknowns that's already half of the crop in the U.S. Like we're all eating GMO and don't know it because it's not labeled. But they say it's for drought resistance. That's a good thing. They say it's to protect against pests. That's a good thing.
But given that,
does it have other consequences? We don't know that.
But then, given that the topic of today is how to feed 8 billion people in the future,
right?
And given that we know that global warming is a fact, and there will have more and more drought, possibly. We will have more water shortage.
Yeah.
So how are we going to feed 8 billion people without certain type of innovations or
all the right questions. I'm not sure that, I told these guys if they could solve the 8 billion question, they're going to get the Nobel Prize. So I think you're right on with your questions that have to be asked as we go forward. But I don't know if we have answers for them.
Lara?
Coming from a finance standpoint, there is no greater reward than something which is unknown, that revolutionizes the ability to use cubic square feet of water, say a drought resistant. People will be very eager to do something that they think, number one, benefits the problem-solving capability. Number two, will be generally adopted. And number three, is a viable product. So in terms of like fear about genetically engineered modification, I'm sure that if we invest in it, then it will catch on. If it catches on, just like you said, Whole Foods doing the crop farming vertically, as soon as it is tested by the consumption, we're going to find out if that was a good decision or not. But that's what it is in every aspect of every technology. The only difference is that our communications systems are so advanced that the politicians who put their weight into these subjects don't want to get burned, like especially how it's happened with the global warming and climate change. So it's a series of communication, political decision-making, and what the market economy will bear. So you're absolutely right. We don't want to intimidate people away from a potentially great solution.
But I also think personally that this is one of those big ethical issues of our time. You know, we learned how to Dolly was the sheep, right? That we cloned a sheep, so it was a perfect replication, and we learned how to do that in the lab. So if we can do it with a sheep, can I do it with Raymond? So we'd have another Raymond, or maybe 10 or 20. So how ethical is that? We're still probably dealing with that question. And I think the same thing is a little bit, I'm not sure about GMO is the same, but we're messing with Mother Nature a little bit here, right? With the DNA of a seed.
I grew up on a farm and I feel that way. I grew up on a farm the first 16 years of my life. My dad feels the same way. And our relatives are still farmers in Sicily, and they all feel the same way.
Feel the same way, meaning?
You're messing with nature. That you know, we grew our food the old-fashioned way, and we used fertilizer the old-fashioned way. We were old-time farmers, and we were basically put out of business by agribusiness, by the ConAgras, the Archer Daniel Midland. They put us out of business. You can't compete with that when you're a small produce farmer. So yeah, for us, it's more than just, you know, feeding the population. I think there are other alternatives. With alternative energy, with what Dan talked about Tuesday. And there's hydroponics, there's vertical farming, there's, I think if we do a combination of those and we look at alternatives instead of just turning to GMOs, I think it's there. I think it's just,
we've got a question over here. You have a question.
Oh, yeah. I just wondered when you were researching if you found any conclusive information on the yields, the increase in yields. I've been looking at it and I haven't found a whole lot of fact-based evidence.
It's hard to find the fact-based evidence. I agree. Did you find any? I guess we didn't cover that in our
yields from
research.
GMOs?
Yeah, and it depends how far back you're looking.
Well, there's an example
yeah,
there.
this is an example of maturity. But I think
so. Maybe you.
Time to harvest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would maybe they could get another harvest in. Right?
If it's a seasonal crop, perhaps not.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I haven't seen much. Did you look into that topic?
A little bit. I don't think we covered it as much as we would like to.
Good work.
Yeah. Oh, Michael.
One of the other conversations, which I haven't heard tonight, is the conversation of intellectual property, where you've got people who can afford to develop these new GMOs. They want to protect their investment and actually pay back their investors sustain it, and talk about the rest of the ecosystem. How do you design these wonderful new plants that will feed everyone, and be able to determine, well, how is it actually propagated through multiple generations? It's a real great mess.
But it's not the fault of the crop. It is the fault of this system. It is how are we going to manage all this potential concern.
Yeah.
But the thing, the invention may be good. If that they don't put the local farmer out of business, then probably that is not a concern. But right now there is, because this is an imbalance, unfair competition here. So this is something concern.
Right?
Pretty good study. A friend of mine is a lawyer in town, and he looks at the balance for a healthy economy like an ecosystem. And they found 80% small business and 20% large forces the evolution to happen. It's one kind of interesting thought. And the other is price Pottinger cats, if you've never heard of them.
What is that?
Price Pottinger cats.
Okay.
So a man was very wealthy back in the early 1900s and became a dentist because he was bored. 6 months a year he went to Africa to do a hunting safari. And he started noticing natives that are 90 years old, men, and they'd have, they would still propagate children. And so he thought it couldn't be their diet, so he researched everything else and found it was their diet. And so he took cats to prove his case on an island, and he found 3 generations of natural made food. If it was natural, they were still strong and healthy, but if it was powdered milk versus raw milk, little changes, cooked meat versus raw, that 3 generations later they had cancer and diabetes, their skulls got narrow. And there was a whole study along this line, it's called Price Pottinger cats, which moves one to assess that natural food is best. And since we're always learning and we never know enough, and the natural processes reveal that, you start to have to assess these farmers' intuition that there's something right about natural. Sunlight, along with water, this process that goes on makes food rather than growing it in a lab, but I haven't heard anything conclusive there.
It's very interesting talk.
Please.
Just one last comment. I get the feeling that we need to raise our respect for biodiversity and our own species. Right now we're dealing with so many diseases, so many potential calamities, so many unknowns. We walk right by and see a person suffering and continue to walk. So many people still drive. We've had public transportation since the beginning of transportation, when it used to be better. Well, now it would be better for many provable reasons, but we have these huge industries and this huge socioeconomic, cultural Google. I think the first thing we need to do is start saying, okay, let's play on a level playing field. Is the ladybug, the homeless man, and myself all allowed a similar environment?
Okay.
The question I thought to ask is, most crops are planted annually, you know, and on a regular basis.
Can you speak a little louder, Francis?
Most of your crops are planted annually on the basis of the norm, your regular wheat and corn. But have you considered any of the products that require a limitation, such as asparagus? You only plant that every 3 years, you know, to see that you can meet the grade that you want to meet to feed enough people. You know, sometimes you're limited in planting your crops. Have you ever looked in that aspect of it? You know, you can plant it more often or plant it in a more, like you said, doubling your crop.
Yeah.
But asparagus, they suggest only, you know, plant it every 3 years. So
I suppose that's the idea behind crop rotation, is to plant one when it works out, and another when it's more convenient for that. As long as you're providing the nutrients in the soil.
Is there any other crop that have a limitation like asparagus?
No, I mean, we don't research. You didn't go deeper in these like crops.
Because
just,
you are
just
trying
the
to
technique.
go.
Yeah, we're trying to show everything.
Sometimes they do have other limitations.
Yeah, I think Pavel.
Right. So to finish this presentation, we'd like to take all these ideas that we have and we want to move forward. And in doing that, we're going to move into another green revolution. Now, in the first one from the 1940s to the 1970s, it would focus around monocropping and high yield varieties for the 3 grains of corn, wheat, and rice. Now, from studies that have shown what the ideas behind the Green Revolution of irrigation and of that nature, they showed that the ratio of crops to population was such that there was plenty of crops for the population, of a 2.5% to about a 2% from 1961 to 1981. Now today, from 1990 to 2010, since this is after the Green Revolution, in what we call the Gene Revolution, because of our population influx, is that the population has now outgrown the amount of crops that are available to all the people, for a 1.2 to a 1.3. So they're almost even, but the population is now outgrowing their crop yield. So by taking all these ideas that we discussed, fertilizer, possible GMOs, or creating more natural food, we would move into a second green revolution, which promotes our ideas of organic fertilizer, pesticides, polyculture, intercropping, crop rotation, that helps small farmers and increases biodiversity and supports a growing population and would affect our food security by promoting it. So by taking all these ideas and moving into a second green revolution, we believe that we can support a larger population if taken the right movements to do so. So to wrap up our presentation with our quote, we chose a quote from Albert Hubbard: "A little more persistence, a little more effort, and what seemed hopeless failure may turn to glorious success." And we believe that is a great representation of what we want to do to feed 8 billion people well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're not done. Let's open it up a little bit more. So, you guys going to still be here? You're not going anywhere? So let's get into this a little deeper. What didn't you hear? What did you want to talk about? Red.
Well, feeding 8 billion people, it seems like a huge task when you think about it. So what is the general model that, based on your research, for solving that problem? What kind of approach?
That was it. You just heard it. It was a second gene. That was a second green revolution, wasn't it?
Yeah, is it growing local only? Is it growing big farms mixed with local? I mean, what do you?
It's a kind of mix of everything. We need to instead produce food for fuel. You need to produce food to feed people. You need to increase the production, the productivity of food. Is this all these facts together? We believe that you make these 8 billion people that you can feed these 8 billion people. It's a kind of a mix of everything. If you combine everything, we believe that this can solve the problem. Yeah.
And one of the things I've read is Price Pottinger, the line is fresh food is best, frozen is second, and canned is third, giving nutrition to people. And one of the solutions that have come up is vacuum packing of raw food. And I guess you might imagine a train car or a diesel truck with a vacuum. You can pump air out of the side of something. You don't have to get it to a perfect vacuum. It doesn't take much energy. I've not heard of anybody doing that yet. Is there any word on that? Vacuum trucks. So you just pump the air out and then close it off, and you have little air left in your box.
Our proposal here is like local farms, not like
local farms.
Yeah, local farms. Like instead this system of food supply for nowadays, you need to change to a local farm solution. So you can have more organic food because you don't need like pesticides and everything should like during the transportation of this food, you don't need like products to maintain the food like kind of fresh. So it's a local farm. It's a kind of a solution of this.
So does the vacuum, explain this to me, does the vacuum then protect it for the
Yeah, well,
transportation?
here's an example, because it's going to take us a while to get to local. So now you have grain towers in the Midwest, and we have grain stored there. We have to introduce chemicals that are poisonous to protect this grain from bugs. One solution is to put good bugs in there. Another solution would be you seal that tower, and you put a little 1-inch hole at the top, and you take a little motor, solar powered, and you pump the air out. And then when it's pumped out, you cap it. Now bad bugs can't go in there without an oxygen environment, and the grain won't spoil because oxygen is what oxidizes things.
So is this being done, or is this your theory?
This is something that could be done on an engineering level.
This is a good theory. So until somebody does it, this is a good theory, right?
It's a good theory.
Now, if we do it in packaging, I know we have vacuum packaging the food.
Yes,
Right.
it works very well.
All right, so you're talking about it on a big scale as opposed to an individual package
Yeah,
scale.
so we see the truck on the freeway with tomatoes. We can evacuate the air. We don't have the bug issue or the spoilage until we get local farms. Same with train cars. It'd be a very simple design, very low cost. But it's just...
But you're saying you want to evacuate the air out so there's less spoilage.
Yes.
But we're still putting a whole lot of fuel to
Well, until we get to local farms, what's the way to get fresh food to people? And is it, have you heard of anything along those lines is the question.
Yeah, this is, I think it's better to transport the food, but our proposal here is not, our solutions are a kind of long-term solution. We don't have like this, how can I say? Intermediate solution, like a short-term solution for the food spoilage. So our solutions are kind of long-term. Local farms, I think, is better because it's my opinion. We really need to shift from food for fuel to food for people. I think we've been talking during these 9-10 weeks to shift the resource of energy. So I think this is the main proposal for us right now.
We also heard just from Hometown Farms. This was a great study. I mean, this guy's brilliant with what he's created. And there was concern originally in Vista of the local farmers. Was he going to hurt their industry, their local industry? And it turns out there are 6,000 farms in San Diego. So I didn't know that myself, but there's that many local farms in town. And they provide what percent of our local food?
30.
Only 30%. So of all the farms in San Diego, 6,000 that are local, that's only 1/3 of our food. So the rest of it comes on a truck or a ship from Chile or from the Midwest. So a lot of it does include that transportation component, even if we got it more and more local. So right now it's a little bit of both, and actually there's more coming on a truck than there is local, as of today. So that's sort of the what so. Well, that doesn't mean it's right, but that's just the condition.
The thing is, it requires less investment if you just do it local farms. Instead, build this technology of take out the air of trucks and everything. We can spend less money with local farms. As you can see, it's 50. It's almost 60% of the food, of the investments in food, the money that you spend on food, it's to distribute the food.
The distribution is an amazing amount of cost
So
in our food.
I'm not sure about the values and everything, but I think it's a kind of cheaper if you invest just in local farms.
Or your backyard. We had a lady in here from Olivewood Gardens who just trains students and parents about backyard farming, composting and a little bit of crop rotation in your own little garden box. It's amazing the production that you can get out of a garden box. And so that's what they're doing here, is training more and more of us how to grow our own. Yeah, sort of the backyard garden concept for more of us.
You got Laura
And,
there.
and mostly for fruits and vegetables. I mean, it really was, that was the focus, of course.
We got Laura.
I was just gonna ask, how does backyard farming work in the sub-Sahara? I mean, that's where the hunger is.
The sub-Saharan. So sub-Saharan is actually very tropical if you think about it, right? Sub-Sahara, you're in a very tropical region.
Yeah, the thing is, Lester Brown mentioned that we need to find more drought-resistant crops and more cold weather resistant crops. But we didn't find an example for now. Everything that we show here, it's always something that is happened already, such as these drought-resistant crops here. This is a kind of example that happened in Zimbabwe. So we're showing this, but you cannot show something. Of course, you know that you need to grow things in the Sahara, for example. But you still don't have an example to show you how to do it. That's why you didn't show it.
So just curiosity, what is the current work for food production? And then how many people, if we have a very well balanced distribution system, how many people that can hold?
We go back to our first slide almost. Did you see that first or second slide that we had?
Yeah, 3.
Was it number 2?
Number 3, please.
Number 3. So
we produce enough food. We produce 3,500 calories a day per capita. So we have enough food to make not just fit, but to make them fat, to make everyone fat.
What's our diet need? Is it a little over 2,000 a day?
25.
2 to 3?
Yeah, it's something like 2,500.
Okay. So we're certainly making enough food, but the problem in many cases is distribution and not enough income for some of those people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that enough food for 8 billion?
Yes. I mean, the production of...
Well, that's for 7 billion.
That's for 7 billion.
But
that's for now.
7 billion of fat people. 7 billion fat people. So now it's enough to feed more.
Yeah, in a quick calculate, I can answer yes, because it's considering a diet of 3,000 calories. Yes, I need to calculate this exactly, but yes, I can answer yes, because you do have 3,500 a day, so of course we have food for us. This is the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO.
FAO, yeah. Raymond, another one?
Yeah, I read one study, meat takes a lot more resources than vegetables. And I talked to one man in town, he actually lives in La Mesa. He's the world champion arm wrestler of the planet. He weighs about 180 pounds, but his arms are huge, and his wife is the female champion.
Yeah.
And I asked him what his secret was for his muscle. I said, you must eat 5 steaks a day. He says, no, I tried every protein product on the planet, and it didn't work as well as getting all the raw foods I needed, that minus the meat. And it sets up my cells to take a little bit of meat or a little protein, and it actually works better. It's a different way of thinking about food, and he demonstrated with his strength. Another example is in the Orient, they didn't have enough meat, so they sprinkled bits of meat on their rice and their vegetables, and they're very healthy. When they could afford lots of meat, they tended to have a whole steak, their health declined. So it's a very interesting way of looking at food combining versus just basic consumption, because we tend to overeat if we don't get the combinations right or something.
It's balance, isn't it? It's having a balanced life, a balanced diet.
We showed here, like in Italy, the diet, they eat half of meat that they eat here in America, and they are healthy. So it's possible.
Italians used to be very fat. I don't know about now. fattest people in Europe.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Actually, I'm from Europe and I really disagree. Yeah.
We could go look that up. It may be anecdotal. I don't know. What's interesting about America, you know, what's the number? It's something like we're overweight by about
40%.
Is it 40% are overweight or have, beyond what it would be a...
Today there's nothing. I was there in the 1960s.
I see, okay. Too much pasta, that's what it was. All right, it looks like we're just about done here this evening. Any more to complete? Thank you guys very much. Very good job. All right? And we have 2 more sessions. The one next Tuesday topic is?
It's, can we mobilize fast enough?
So the question that we asked actually at the very beginning was, is there enough time, enough urgency on the planet to make this transition quick enough? So that's the question that we'll engage in next week. The last week will be a summary session where we will actually tie all of these sessions together, and that'll be 2 weeks from today. I think the interesting one that you might be interested in, if you want to continue this conversation around food locally, next Tuesday, our Green Scene evening that we're hosting, we have Eric Larson, who is the executive director of the San Diego County Farm Bureau. So he represents the 6,000 farmers here in San Diego, and he's their trade representative for that community. But then also Karen Melville, who works with San Diego County Weights and Measures, and her job is to make sure that the pesticides and insects that are in our food system, that we have safe food. That's her job. So sort of that juxtaposition of somebody that wants to get as much food out of the county as we can, and the person in the county who makes sure that what we get on our plates is safe. So that'll be next Tuesday night, and invite you all back then. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for being here. Great job, you guys. Thanks.
Nice work.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry we got you on the wrong chair. We shouldn't have put you on that high.
She's lucky, thank God, nothing happened.
I'm the director here. Yeah. You're at the World Resource SimCenter, so that's where you're at. And this is a facility to do visualization. Obviously, you can see we want to work on sustainability and use visualization we want to use visualization to accelerate sustainability locally and globally.
Yes, not San Diego and North County part of it.
No, not. Talking about
we have some terrific people. Actually, the
local, just working here.
A local gentleman who used to be the planner for the city of San Diego. He now works with the company, but he's the chairman of the American Planning Association, William Anderson. So he's right here in San Diego. So here, the American Planning Association. We have a new city planner, Bill Fulton, who was the mayor of Ventura and a leader in the sustainability. Okay, but this is a great place to learn.